Songs from the Hole is a musical documentary about a radical act of forgiveness that takes place in a prison. I speak with the director, Contessa Gayles. I'm Thom Powers, and this is Pure Nonfiction. Songs from the Hole arrived on Netflix this month after winning the South by Southwest Audience Award and the Blackstar Jury Prize. The Hollywood Reporter praised the film's artistry. The critic Daniel Fienberg wrote, "Formally, this isn't a film you've seen before. Songs from the Hole is an autobiography told in song, a series of deeply personal music videos that double as journal entries, confessions, and self-analysis. It's eye-opening in a way you may have forgotten your eyes could still be opened." At the center of the film is James Jacobs, known by his nickname 88. He grew up in Southern California in a milieu of gang culture, raised with a street philosophy that respect is earned through violence. In 2004, when he was just 15 years old, he shot and killed a man over nothing. 3 days later, his older brother was murdered. From then on, 88 was carrying two sets of trauma, for taking a life and for having his brother taken from him. 88 was sent to prison with a double life sentence and began writing and performing rap songs as a kind of therapy.
That's when I felt that I failed and I fell to my knees and I pleaded with God, well, let me know when my soul ever prevail, cause it's cold in this hole that I dwell. I am living in the steel, where everything is still.
In the film, 88 describes a turning point in his life when inside the prison he meets the man who killed his brother. He's racked with doubt about what to do, but he finally decides to offer forgiveness to his brother's killer because 88 knows that's the kind of forgiveness that he desperately wishes to receive himself. The filmmaker Contessa Gayles first met 88 when she was making a different film called The Feminist on Cellblock Why. That film, made for CNN, looks at a group of male prisoners in an education group studying toxic masculinity and the role it's played in their lives. 88 was a participant in the program that was run by his friend Richie Reseda, another prisoner. Later, 88 and Richie reached out to Contessa to ask if she'd help them to create a music video. That was the seed of the idea that became Songs from the Hole. Richie got out of prison and joined the project as a producer. For most of the 6 years of its making, 88 was still in prison, but his sentence was commuted by California Governor Gavin Newsom based on the age when 88 went to prison and his rehabilitative work. 88 was released on parole in 2022, just as the film was being finished. Contessa has been busy. Last year, she completed another documentary called The Debutantes about the revival of a black debutante ball in Ohio. I sat down with her this month face-to-face in Montclair, New Jersey, where we both live. I started by asking how her career got started at CNN.
So I came to CNN before I finished my master's at NYU in documentary film. I started interning for CNN the summer before I graduated and then got hired on full-time from there. And I was primarily in this original storytelling unit that got to do things that were like slightly off the news cycle, maybe news adjacent, original series. I worked with different reporters and hosts on camera like Lisa Ling. And then I got to do things without reporter on camera where it was, short films and then eventually the feature film, The Feminist on Cellblock Y. And I think I came to CNN wanting to just cut my teeth. That was like the era, I don't know if we're still in that era of like the Predator, the producer, editor, shooter, like you do all of the things. And that was great because I really honed a lot of skills very quickly. And I also had an idea of wanting to change things from within a bit when it comes to how storytelling around communities of color and particularly Black communities is done. And I think I did some of that as I was learning and coming into my own political consciousness more and more. And by the time the Feminist on Cellblock Y came out, I had been at CNN for 4 years at that point, and I think I knew that I wasn't going to get away with doing something like that again. Our unit was disbanded. It was like right after Trump was elected, and there was a shift in priorities at the network in terms of what things were being resourced and covered. And so I was like, it's now or never. Otherwise, I would have been maybe absorbed into another part of the company. But I was like, this is the moment.
When you were thinking about being inside an organization like CNN and trying to do some good to change narrative inside the place, I wonder if you can trace that back to things you had read or experiences you'd had, or what was informing Contessa's idea that like something needs to be changed inside an organization like CNN, and maybe this is the way I can do it.
I don't even know if it was, specific to CNN. It's just media in general, particularly news media. When it comes to covering communities of color, the stories they're on either end of the extremes. Either the most depressing, often told in a stereotypical way, or a sensationalized way, or it's like this Black or brown person deserves your attention because they achieve like the most extreme accomplishment, and they're at let's put them on a pedestal. I think that was my just experience in general of media and storytelling around Black people, and knowing that there was a lot in between that just wasn't being uplifted, and it is necessary that like the full spectrum of our humanity is depicted, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, represented in storytelling, so that folks can recognize themselves outside of the extremes, and to know that the other pieces of their lives are valuable, not just their traumas, not just their extreme accomplishments.
I asked Contessa how she was affected by making 2 films about prisons and being around people who are deeply involved in issues of prison reform.
Well, it's radicalized me. I don't think I would have identified as an abolitionist or really had much education in that space, a prison abolitionist, until I started engaging with this through my work. And that's really transformative for me through the process of making these 2 films, that that political shift has happened for me. And
can you talk a little bit more about that? Kind of, how you would characterize yourself before then, and what kind of shift you experienced?
I think before, just not conscious and not engaged or educated about that particular subject matter. I think that it was not something that I was closed off to. It just wasn't something that I necessarily engaged with in my personal life. And so it wasn't until, I think, going into the prison and making Feminist on Cellblock Y that I really started to identify as a prison abolitionist. And all of the research that goes into making both of these films, the thought leaders that I was following and authors that I was reading whose work has been going on for decades before in this movement, in this space, was a part of informing that, in addition to doing the work.
And so when you use the expression prison abolitionist, what does that mean to you?
Prison abolition is understanding that there are other solutions to addressing harm and violence and preventing harm and violence in our communities that, don't require locking people up, and building towards the futures that are centering, taking care of everyone's needs, centering people and not centering profit, and building towards the solutions that guarantee dignity, health, safety for everyone. And safety doesn't look like locking people up.
I may have to say, if the 88 story of recognizing that his brother's killer was in prison alongside him and having to make a choice about what he was going to do about that, making the choice that he was going to offer him forgiveness because that was the forgiveness that 88 craved so much in his own life for the deep regret that he had over taking someone's life. That construct is a profound one in the film. I think it's one of the gifts of this film to viewers to be able to share such an extreme example of forgiveness, and the thoughtfulness that that 88 brings in expressing that is something that will stay with me for a long time after watching this. I wonder, how you process that radical forgiveness.
I think, as you put it, it is an extreme example. And I think because of that, we can all find entry points somewhere from, the not so extreme to all the way at the extent and level of forgiveness that 88 gave to Jamal and ultimately gave to himself as well. I really do think that what called me to work on this film was a real desire to help people heal from their traumas and the traumas that they have inflicted on other people, and the harm and the pain. And for folks to understand what 88 says at the end of the film, my shortcomings do not diminish my good, for folks to really hold that as they're being held accountable and holding themselves accountable and holding the people around them accountable. I think Indigo is the other person, 88's then girlfriend, now wife, in the film, who puts it really succinctly and profoundly. My healing cannot be found in someone else's punishment. I think that's really a tent pole of the abolitionist framework, and where I saw, just that sentiment is where I saw, I know a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this if they hear it and receive it, and that it has the potential to shift things for a lot of people and how they view the world that they live in, whether it's their interpersonal relationships or the systems that they live underneath and maybe don't stop to question. That's why I was called to make the film, to help people heal and to find different entry points into seeing their own stories reflected in what feels like, an extreme story. Maybe you've never dealt with the type of violence that is described in the film, but we've all experienced some harm, and a lot of us have also caused some harm.
So you were carrying the story for 6 years. As a storyteller, it's easy to feel a responsibility towards the people that you're filming. There's a kind of unspoken commitment when you show up to someone's house and film something that is that's very difficult to, or that carries hopes that they have, and then walk away and carry the responsibility of making a story out of that hopefully is going to go out in the world and touch people. And over the course of several years of making it, any filmmaker can experience a lot of ups and downs, wondering if they're capable of telling this story, even if they tell the story as best they can, is it going to get out into the world? I wonder how you carried yourself in over those years and grappled with the kinds of feelings I'm describing.
Yes, I felt all of that very deeply. And it was on a lot of levels. It was the very tough subject matter and knowing what I wanted to say with the film, that it was very, I had to get it right to not cause more damage. And also with actually like the form of the film, it being a visual album documentary, very much like experimenting with pushing form and genre, that was very execution dependent. It was conceptually something that we had in mind, that we were kind of building the plane as we were flying it, but if it didn't land, that it was just going to be a mess, and then the message would be lost. And also, as you say, like really caring for the participants while caring for the film team and for myself. We just moved pretty slowly, actually, and we had, I think, the blessing in disguise of the pandemic kind of hitting right as we were about to transition from development into production. That kind of really slowed us down and gave us more room to be as intentional as we could along the way. And I'm grateful for that moment to like step back and pause. It was also very collaborative. Richie is formally incarcerated, and he was producing this film. 88 was incarcerated throughout the entire production and about 8 months into post-production. And so with the different positions and life experiences that the three of us held, and then our producer, David Felix Sutcliffe, who was with us since the beginning as a consulting producer, but then joined as like a full producer in post-production. We all were holding different pieces and making sure that we were holding things together. And coming from the different life experiences that we all come from, I think it was helpful that we could all speak to different things and hold each other in different ways. I went to therapy. That was like we were all in therapy at some point in this process and continue to be, which I think is really necessary. And just like really like leaning into family and friends and community support systems while we were making this. I think we all had different versions of what that looked like, but just to give like a more specific example, our weekly team calls, production calls, were like 2 hours long, and obviously we're in touch all throughout the week outside of those calls, but the first, I think, 30 minutes of those 2-hour calls was just us like checking in on a personal level with each other. And it was really like intentionally demarcated time to do that before we get into the work, because yeah, we were all holding a lot. This was heavy. Continues to be.
I've no doubt. With Richie in particular, I should ask you more about his collaboration as someone who'd had the experience of being incarcerated. Can you talk more about the set of experiences that he was able to bring to this that would have been wholly unique, I have to imagine?
Definitely. I think it was so interesting but also seamless for me that he was the protagonist of my first film. And when he presented the idea to me to collaborate on this project, and he was going to produce and I was going to direct, I'm not going to say I didn't think twice, but like I really knew and trusted that it was going to work, and that we would fill in the gaps.
First of all, you knew him, so you had maybe a different relationship to him when he was a participant in your film, but had enough exposure to him that you could kind of have a sense of him as a person. Yeah,
and I think for me, it was, after I left CNN, part of me leaving was that I knew I wanted to pursue the independent filmmaking so that I could, do a lot more things creatively, but also because I was interested in like unlearning some of the traditional journalistic tenets that I learned about, subject and filmmaker relationship and objectivity and all these things that I think are useful in some cases, but not always useful to prescribe to as set rules that we always have to follow. So I just had to like do that switch in my brain. And then once I did, it was, from there, so incredible to have obviously someone who was incarcerated with 88, so, had that friendship with him. They collaborated on the music together, so he was also the music producer in addition to being the producer of the film. And having had the experience of having a film that really took off, and he's built a lot of recognition since the Feminist on Cellblock Y came out, to have him internally be able to talk to me and also talk to 88 about the experience of being at the center of a film, having a piece of your life story out there for public consumption, and the kind of lessons learned from that we could then employ on behalf of 88 and just keep in mind as we were going through our process with him and his family, was super unique, I think, and valuable to have.
You have this film coming out in the last year. You had the film The Debutantes. You've had, I don't want to overstate this, but I mean you've had a good run of projects, but projects that are worthwhile projects. You have things that
You can overstate it.
Things that feed your soul,
Yeah.
things that came out, really well, things that, have gotten recognition, that brings a payoff for the years of sacrifice and uncertainty that you put into them. And as these films are coming out, we're living through a period in documentary filmmaking where it feels harder and harder to make those kinds of films. I wonder, how you're experiencing that.
It kind of, I don't know if this is delusional, but I'm just I don't really care what the market is doing. I'm still going to make the things that I want to make and say the things that I want to say through the films, and they will find their audiences. I believe it. I can't really make all of my decisions about what I'm doing next and how I'm doing it based on what the market is doing right now, because it will continue to shift. These things take years to make, and by the time it's coming out in the world, who knows what the market is going to look like then. So I'm just trying not to get too bogged down in that and just recenter on why I wanted to do this work in the first place. It's an act of community service at the end of the day. And if I continue to center that, this is all in service of community, I think I'll continue to do the work that I feel called to do, and not be too influenced by everything else that's going on in the ecosystem, which is hard. But I'm gonna stay in the delusion.
I want to thank Contessa Gayles for speaking with me. Her film, Songs from the Hole, is now playing on Netflix. You can look up her previous works, The Feminist on Cellblock Y and The Debutantes. Thanks to our team, Doc Voices writer Bella Racklin, series producer Hannah Nordenswan, and web designer Cross Strategy. Our theme music is composed by Andre Williams, and our executive producer is Raphaela Nahausen. I'm Thom Powers. Follow us on Instagram and visit our website at purenonfiction.net.